Hello, Luis Moreno Campo, fellow Argentinian. It's great to be having this conversation with you. Thank you for taking the time. So, I would love to discuss human rights with you because at Reserve, we are asking the United Nations to declare access to a stable currency a fundamental human right. So, you played a major role in the democratic transition in Argentina. You were the prosecutor of the trial to the military juntas. And then you were also the first prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. So you dedicated your life to finding those places around the world where human rights were being infringed and prosecuting them, right? Prosecuting those who were infringing them. So what do you think about our claim of declaring access to a stable currency a fundamental human right?
It is very interesting. First, I was originally a prosecutor, so I investigated crimes. But I found the crimes committed in Argentina during the dictatorship were basically part of international conflict. The French exported, not just champagne and fashion, the French exported the strategy to deal with terrorism. And the Argentinians bought it. And the guerrillas were backed by Cuba and the Soviet Union. And the army was backed by the US. So there was a national and international conflict. And I was investigating corruption, similar. Big corruption cases are always international, involving money coming from different places, going here and there. So I started to learn more about international. I was teaching at Harvard these issues, and then suddenly they offered me a crazy dream position. I was the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, the first international justice system in the world. So it's like Nuremberg, but permanent. You know how many times the UN Charter requests international justice? Guess. 5, 10, 3. Answer is, what's your...
No, how many? I was going to ask you, how many?
What's your guess?
I don't know.
Tell me, 10, 1?
How many times the UN? Oh,
Charter,
one?
The UN Charter, which is basically the UN Constitution, requests international justice.
How many?
Tell me. I know the answer, but tell me. I like your guess. I like your how big was the idea of international justice, international criminal justice, in 1945, after the end of the Second World War, when the Nazis were prosecuted, Nuremberg was there. So how big was the idea of international justice, criminal justice in those days?
Zero.
Yes, zero. Yes, zero. Why do you say zero? Because basically the UN system is not a different institution. It's basically a meeting place for sovereign states to meet. That's why at the same time in 1948, so 3 years after, the UN was created in 1945, at the same moment that the Second World War stopped. 3 years later, 48, there was this idea of human rights approved, no? And the idea was we have global principles. The problem is global principles are implemented by national states. And at the end, the national state decide what they do. And no one can interfere with them. That's the concept. So yes, we have global principles, but implementation, that's different. That's why your idea to request the UN approval for your cryptocurrency is funny for me.
No, but we're not requesting approval for a cryptocurrency. It's take out the cryptocurrency project. It's just we want to declare access to a stable currency a fundamental human right, regardless of our project.
But no. Yeah, but normally states don't like something affecting their own power. That's why there was no mention to international criminal justice in the UN Charter, because no president wants a global prosecutor investigating him, you see? And then currency and criminal justice are two critical components of sovereignty. That's why you are demanding people who have different interests to support you, and they don't have the same interests. I believe normal people, yes, they don't like genocide, they don't like crimes against humanity, and they don't like a bad economy, inflation. Inflation is really bad for poor people in particular. And normal people don't like a weak currency or no currency. But states want it. And that's why you, instead to go to the people, you go to the UN. I think, okay, I don't know if your system will work. My suggestion is focus more on people than in the UN. Show me that people in Venezuela or in the refugee camps or in Afghanistan or Iraq are using your currency. That would be a good test for me, more than any UN declaration.
Okay, but regardless of our currency, do you agree with our claim? Do you agree that access to a stable currency should be a fundamental human right? Because what we think is that many of the human rights that are stated by the United Nations are not attainable unless you have access to a stable currency. So do you agree with that statement?
Okay. Yes, I think the fact to have a good currency is important for the economy and important for people. That is obvious. You have to distinguish human rights. Some of them are like the right of some freedoms and the right not to be affected by the state, different than the economic and social human rights. That economic and social human rights are more complicated because it's not clear how the state will guarantee your job, for instance. More and more, because in the 21st century economy, mostly the private sector produce work, not the state. And the ability of many states to control big corporations is low. So how Burundi or Bolivia can control Microsoft? They cannot. It's much bigger, no? So we are living in a new world where companies are global and they have more power than many states, including big states. So, in fact, Denmark was opening an embassy before in San Francisco before the big corporate tech companies because they are more relevant than having an embassy in Paraguay for Denmark. So we're in a new world, and then you are doing something cutting edge. You are developing a private currency that could be useful for people to do changes. And instead to go ahead and implement and show that it's working, you go back to the old system and request, hey, recognize we're human rights. Show, if you're a real human right, if you are adding value to protect human rights, do it. Show, give us a test of your ability. That would be my opinion. I'm sorry.
So, well, that we're doing already. That okay. We're doing.
Where? Well, tell me about that, because I'm more interested in that than in the idea that you should be considered a human right.
But so you think that the I want to stick to something you just said. You think the United Nations is part of the old system? You think that's part of the past already? Would you say that?
No, it's part of the evolution. Look, Athens in the 5th century before Jesus Christ was the biggest political institution. If you were inside Athens and you were a citizen, you had rights. Athens cannot kill you without a trial. But if you were outside Athens, meaning 60 kilometers, more or less, city, Athens kill you with no problem, with no mercy. So took 22 centuries, but then the world evolved from cities to national states. In the 17th, 18th century, the national state was created and developed. Does not eliminate cities. Cities are still important. And the mayors have a authority, but it's different. It's not something bigger. So the UN is part of this evolution. It's a way to articulate independent states, but it's not the end of the evolution. It should be a part of the evolution. And that's why the International Criminal Court created by the Rome Statute was an important piece of the evolution, because it created something bigger than sovereign state, creating a global justice institution. And that's why it's so controversial and it's so new. And we are not moving that direction, because basically, normally, people that create global institutions were most of them from US. And US has no interest to have something bigger than the US. There was a senator who was saying, there is the American people, the American government, and God. Nothing between God and the American government. So US does not like something bigger than the US. And that's why the UN is basically a place to meet. Do you know the Knicks, the basketball team? Okay.
I'm in New York, so yes.
So you like, okay.
Yes, I like going
to the Madison Square Garden. Okay.
Yes.
Someone say, blaming the UN for the lack of security in the world is like blaming the Madison Square Garden because the Knicks are playing bad basketball. Okay? So the Knicks play in the Madison Square Garden. The states play in the UN building. But the UN system is just a place where the states meet. And that's why I don't think the idea is so important to... I like the idea to recognize the human rights. You see, you don't need the UN to say that. The most important thing for me is you prove the concept. If you prove, look, this community is managing their interaction with this currency and it's working. That is what you should do, in my opinion.
Yes, so we have thousands of merchants, for instance, in Venezuela. People use reserve on their day-to-day transactions for goods, for services, it's already being used. Yes, but we think that there is a big symbolic value in the United Nations declaring this as a human right, because many times humanitarians around the world dedicate their work to eradicating, for instance, wars or fighting against climate change. But I don't know if people really focus on bad finance or the fact that you are born in a country with high inflation and you can't save money to pay for education, for health, to plan ahead. And then someone maybe with the same education, with the same work that you do in another country is capable of saving, of making progress, of evolving. So what we think is that having access to a stable currency should be something inherent to a human being. It shouldn't depend on which country you're born in. Okay. So that's why we want to claim this, because we think that if it is recognized as that, and it's not the first time that the UN would include new rights, right? They included, for instance, the right to clean water. And when the UN, it does have a symbolic value. I understand what you say about the Madison Square Garden and the Knicks, but it does have an important value. So if they declare this a human right, they could potentially dedicate more funds to helping countries. Now we have the technology to do it also, not only reserve, but there's so many other projects that can provide solutions for these problems, these financial problems.
Okay, let me give you some of my experience with the UN. I remember in 2010, there was a group of ambassadors organizing a meeting to make a ceremony to recognize the adoption 10 years before of Resolution 1325, establishing the importance of appointing women as mediators in conflict. And I say, Ambassador, it's really good that you are doing that, very important, but we are celebrating a resolution that was never implemented. In 10 years, never happened. And can we talk about Darfur? Because Darfur is a genocide by rape. So it would be so important to have a woman as mediator in Darfur. And the ambassador told me, oh, it's a great idea, but we cannot do it. Why not? In the UN, when we discuss principles, we don't discuss facts. If we discuss the facts, we don't discuss principles. So that is a model of UN. It's very symbolic, yes. If that's just a symbolic, fine, do it. But it will be symbolic, no money there. I suppose if your idea is working and people in Venezuela are using the cryptocurrency to intermediate, that could be a business. And then incentives are there for business. So the money will come from business people. And that's the best. It's not money from states, it's money from business. That is and money for people working and people getting jobs and people using it. That is for me the most appealing thing. Who is supporting you in Venezuela? The government?
No, it's just the people uses it. Crypto is just used by the people. It's the people have the power. They use it.
But that's fantastic. That is amazingly interesting because
it's a democratic service, you know?
That's fantastic. It's a people service. That's great. That's amazing because in Venezuela, there are serious allegations of massive atrocities. The government is committing basically massive persecution of political opponents and incarceration and torture. And the OAS was deeply involved. Luis Almagro, the Secretary General, was really working hard. The International Criminal Court is watching, but still it's happening. Still, they are not transforming. So, because it's heavy to transform, to do these institutional changes. If you can affect the life of the people through the cryptocurrency, that would be incredibly important. So you should do more on that, case studies on that.
But that's what we're doing. We go to the places that need us the most. That's why we started in Venezuela. We're going to Argentina. I have some interesting questions that I see that some of the people who are watching us are writing here. Rene wrote a few questions, then I'll pass them to you, Luis.
Okay. You don't have to do it.
So I'll read you the question because I think it's very good. And it says, interesting to compare cities of the Roman Empire, as you said earlier, economically based on slavery, with current hyperinflation problems. Maybe we are slaves of the banks and governments. This is about freedom.
Yeah, in fact, I was talking, Athens was before the Roman Empire, but it's fine. Yes, yeah. In those days, there were few citizens and many slaves. And then you can say, look, cryptocurrency is the way to provide freedom for people. That's interesting. That could be possible. Cryptocurrency also allowed to manage, to support terrorism and drug dealers, but yes, so it's double-edged as normal. But it's fine.
Yes, as every tool. Yeah. And it will eventually be regulated, as it happened even with Gutenberg and print. When Gutenberg happened with the print of mobile types, people thought like, okay, we can now generate more literature, but it could be good literature, but it could also be fake literature. Yeah. How are we going to control this? And it's the end of the European civilization. And that's what they thought in the 15th century. And then eventually human beings always find institutions to regulate new technologies and new processes. So I think it's going to be the same case. And what's fascinating is that we are in the midst of that right now.
Yeah.
But
No.
Yeah.
Oh, but talking about the print took transform social institutions. Because first was Luther changed religion, then Kant changing the thinking on political systems, and then implementation. And the French Revolution and the US Revolution were showing that. Not just political, was the Enlightenment. So, but took 3 centuries. Now we are living a similar revolution with the artificial intelligence in 2 decades. That's why, yes, you are jumping on time. What you are talking is really important, but it's very revolutionary, because it's showing a transformation of economic and social rights from a private sector without the government. And that could be interesting to check and to see it. And it's fine. I like the idea you present as a human right, because it's a global human right. How it's working, we'll see. We'll see how it's working. But it's a very interesting concept. It's right on time. And I really believe the main challenge is to put artificial intelligence to serve public purpose. That is really the biggest challenge. Because until now, artificial intelligence is used by the public sector to kill better, to drones, to spy better with the system to spy your communications, and to interfere with the elections, for instance. Russia did very well interfering with elections, or Cambridge Analytica, I would say, not Russia. Cambridge Analytica did very well interfering in Trinidad and Tobago and in the US, its elections. So the fact to put artificial intelligence at the service of people is so important. So it's a new way to promote human rights. I would suggest that. It's a new way to promote human rights. It's not asking for the state to support it. It's doing through private sector and giving people a tool to protect themselves. Would be great. I think for me, it's the future, in fact. For me, the future. And I would like if you can have similar tools to provide security for people, because that could be great. And it's possible, probably, to people coordinating. I don't know if you remember, a few years ago in Argentina, a TV show where you work, La Nata, they did a very interesting tape showing that in a very poor neighborhood in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, close to Buenos Aires, the very poor people going to work in the morning, they were robbed by gangsters, by groups. And these people in the neighborhood found as a solution to walk together to the train station. So they organized themselves, leaving 5 early in the morning, 20, 30 people together, walking together to the train station. And therefore they were safe. No one attacked them. And I imagine coordination is a way to protect people. So I suppose this currency could be showing, okay, there are things that technology could do in a different way that we should test. So I like the idea. I like the idea to test the idea. I like to see how it's working. I like to call it human right. Nice. If you try to insist in the UN do it, maybe you get it. That's fine. It's symbolic, as you say. It's symbolically could be important.
It's a technology for the people, by the people, used by the people. If people don't use it, the technology won't work. The magic here is that the more people adopt it, the more merchants adopt it, the more solid and stronger the currency is. And it's a currency that protects people from the terrible effects of high inflation. But it's as long as people use it. So as you said, it's this coordination of the example you were mentioning of the neighbors walking together to work.
Yeah.
This is, as people, we protecting each other. We're not depending on another institution to protect us. So in that sense, but when we go to the UN, I think it's, as you said, symbolic, right? Now, it's curious because you were the first prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. You were part of that system.
No. That's the point. I think the International Criminal Court is connected with the UN system, but it's
Connected.
different. It's
different.
And it's transforming the UN system.
But connected with those institutions, with that world, right? So when I asked you, what do you think about our claim? And I thought you would say, I never thought you would say you're just going to that's an old system. Why are you going to go to the UN? I wouldn't expect that from you. I just think it's so interesting. And you say, nation states don't matter anymore. It's part of the past.
No, I never say that.
Okay, I'm simplifying, but your answer was even more extreme than what we're claiming, sort of. And I wasn't expecting that from you. So I think it's so interesting.
No, what I saw, because the national state was important. That's why I don't like to dismiss it. It's very important.
Okay, I simplified there, but you were like, nation states?
No, it's important. The problem is, in the 21st century, we need something bigger, different than nation states. And probably will be something not just bigger, different, based on technology. And the concept is that was Harvard. I was in the debate, Harvard thinking the challenge for the next 10 years. They were thinking the idea, we should be sure artificial intelligence serve public purpose. That was the concept. The problem is Harvard is still considered itself an American university. So they feel, okay, but it had to be around the government. And say, guys, if you develop a tool, a global tool for health or for something, it's helping people in India, in Guatemala, around the world, not just for America. And it's different. Oh, no. For them, it's difficult. For Harvard, it's difficult. So that's why what I see the tension between the concept of where my community is just my country, and what you're suggesting is my community is the world. And that is the tension that I see. And I like to have in the same way, the national state did not destroy the cities, instead protect the cities. A global system could protect the states, but should be different and bigger, and more bigger in terms of size. And I see because the incentives are different, I believe the state will have difficulties to support a lot your cryptocurrency, because it's against the incentives. For them, it's important to keep nationality and sovereignty. You can see that in Spain, in Argentina, in everywhere. There are many people demanding more protection for sovereignty in economic terms too. Because of course,
how do you see the future of the world order and of the nation state? How do you see the future of the world order?
Very complicated. Very difficult. I think we need to invent it. That was, we need to reinvent the new system. And then your generation should understand the previous system to use artificial intelligence to prepare a new system. But you really have to understand the old system to transform it. And that's something I don't see it happening, because I was teaching at Yale, and one of my students did a project explaining that the real problem of the Islamic State were the webmasters. He showed the real danger of the Islamic State are not the combatants, are the webmasters who are really managing the communication and attracting more and more people. Because basically, you kill one terrorist and then new come. The webmaster managed to show that your fellow Muslims are being killed, and then you have the duty to revenge. That is the problem with fighting with terrorists, just killing them. You are multiplying the problem. And then he said, the big problem are the webmasters. And then he told me the CIA requesting a project for him. Oh, it's a great opportunity. What are you going to suggest? Well, focus not so much in the combatants, focus on the webmasters. Okay, and what to do with the webmasters? Oh, just kill them, drone the webmasters. So he understood the problem, being a young guy, understanding the communications importance, but then use all tools. Killing people is not a solution. So that's why when I see the future, I see, yes, we need new generation trying to create collective action in a different way. And the problem is, normally the brains are in Palo Alto. I don't know if you live in, I was living in Palo Alto for a month, and it's different than La Matanza in Argentina. It's completely different. It's very different. So it's difficult for people living in Palo Alto to understand how Kenya or La Matanza in Buenos Aires or India slums work. And in fact, we need collective action of these people. Because as you say rightly, in the world of today, no one is protecting the poorest. So providing technology.
Well, that's why the biggest part of our team is based in the countries where we are seeking or already operate.
Okay, I like to have you showing us what you are doing. That would be great to know more, because I think that is the real thing. And then keep thinking, okay, what? But because if you know your clients, if you start to work with these people, you could develop new tools. You could develop not just for currency, for security, for education, for health. Coordination will help these people, and using technology to improve coordination and collective action is a challenge. Collective action is the challenge of the world is coming.
So it's great because the first prosecutor of the International Criminal Court agrees with our claim. And I'm saying this from a humble perspective, right? We have your blessing. What you just said, it's pretty strong. It's pretty strong. I wasn't expecting any of this from you.
No, I really believe artificial intelligence is the most important tool to change our life, the public life. Because if not, the old system is collapsing. Basically, in Argentina, in US, everywhere you see the communication present confrontation, basically. Then there's no coordination, there's no cooperation, it's more confrontation. And leaders have more advantage promoting confrontation and cooperation. So that's why it's affecting the efficiency of the system. Therefore, the idea to provide collective action and coordination through artificial intelligence is absolutely what we need now. Yes, and there's no time to do it. So I hope your system is working.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Nieves. Thank you very much.
It was a real treat to talk about this with you. Okay. Real. I know you dedicated your whole life to stopping human rights infringements around the world. So
no, but I like if you can do something more specific on this. If you can present, I like to see some of you presenting what you're doing in Venezuela and inviting people to understand better and to promote that discussion. That is a very important debate. I think because basically I wrote a book about the global justice system, who will come in a few months. But this economic side is a very important aspect of human rights. So if you can show that and we can discuss with people, this idea would be very interesting for me. Okay?
That's what we think, that the economic aspect is sometimes ignored when we talk about human rights. Finance and the economy are many times ignored, or they don't have the focus that they should. Because can we really, as human beings, live with dignity without having access to good finance or to a stable currency? It's tough, right? You need that.
Economic theory is still based on consider state very important, but they are not thinking in protection. They think more in incentives. So if you like to reach the economy, show the incentives, how the system you are preparing, transform incentives and help to articulate the interest. And I think you could do that probably. So that is the most intriguing part, how you help people to harmonize their individually interests and create collective action. That would be great. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Nieves. Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone for watching.